Subscribe to our channel for more gripping stories that pull at your heartstrings and keep you hooked until the very end. Block 1. I'm Lily, a college student scraping by, and I thought this babysitting gig would be a quick way to pay my bills. The job was at a mansion so grand it felt like stepping into a movie set, all marble and chandeliers. Mr. Harrington, the single dad who hired me, was a CEO with a schedule tighter than a drum. He barely looked at me when we met, just handed me a list of Clara's routines. Clara, his 6-year-old daughter, was a quiet girl with big, curious eyes that followed me everywhere. My role was simple: watch her, feed her, get her to bed. No complications, no emotions, just a job. But something about Clara's shy smile tugged at me from day one. I didn't know then how much she'd change my life. The house felt cold, despite its luxury, like it was missing something vital. I figured I'd do my job, collect my paycheck, and move on. Little did I know, Clara had other plans for me. I was about to learn what it really means to be needed. My first day was a blur of learning Clara's world, her favorite toys, her picky eating habits, her bedtime stories. She clung to me, not like a kid to a babysitter, but like I was her anchor in that big house. Mr. Harrington was gone before I arrived and didn't return until late, leaving Clara with me. I'd make her laugh with silly voices while reading her books, and she'd giggle uncontrollably. Her laughter filled the empty halls, warming the sterile mansion just a bit. I started to notice how she'd watch me cook, asking questions like she was starving for attention. "Why do you cut carrots like that?" she'd ask, tilting her head. I'd explain, and she'd nod like it was the most important lesson ever. By the end of the week, she was holding my hand everywhere we went. I told myself it was just a job, but her tiny hand in mine felt heavier than that. I wasn't prepared for how much I'd start caring. The lines between babysitter and something more were already blurring. Clara's favorite thing was dinner time, where we'd sit at this massive dining table meant for a dozen people. It was just us two, the table dwarfing her small frame as she swung her legs in her chair. I'd cook simple meals, mac and cheese, chicken nuggets, things she loved but weren't fancy. She'd chatter about her day, her school, her imaginary friends, and I'd listen, really listen. Mr. Harrington was rarely home for dinner, always caught up in meetings or trips. I started wondering what kind of dad leaves a kid like Clara so alone. One night, she drew a picture of us eating together and taped it to the fridge. "This is our family," she said, so casually it stunned me. I laughed it off, but my heart did a weird flip. I wasn't her mom, I was just the babysitter. Right. But the way she looked at me, like I was her whole world, shook me. I started dreading the day this job would end. About a month in, I noticed Clara mimicking me, tying her shoes the way I did, brushing her hair like I showed her. It was cute at first, but then it felt like she was trying to keep a piece of me with her. She'd ask me to stay longer, even after her bedtime, her eyes pleading. I'd tuck her in, read an extra story, anything to make her feel secure. Mr. Harrington started coming home earlier some nights, but he was distant, always on his phone. Once, he caught me singing Clara to sleep and paused at the door, watching us. I thought he'd say something, but he just nodded and left. I wondered what he thought of me, this college kid in his perfect house. Clara, though, didn't care about his wealth or status. She just wanted love. I started feeling like I was filling a gap I wasn't hired for. The weight of that realization was heavier than I expected. I wasn't sure how much longer I could keep pretending this was just a job. One evening, Clara had a nightmare and crawled into my lap, sobbing, calling me her safe place. I held her, rocking her gently, my heart breaking for this little girl who felt so alone. She whispered that her mom left when she was a baby, and she didn't understand why. I didn't know what to say. How do you explain abandonment to a 6-year-old? I just hugged her tighter, promising I'd always be there when she needed me. The words slipped out before I could stop them, and I meant them. Mr. Harrington walked in, catching the tail end of our moment, and for once, he looked at me. Really looked. His eyes were tired, like he was carrying his own ghosts. He thanked me quietly and left, but something shifted that night. I started wondering about his story, why he was so detached. Clara's trust in me was becoming my anchor too. I wasn't just babysitting anymore. I was building something real. The next week, Clara started asking me to do mom things, like braiding her hair or helping with her homework. She'd say, "My friend's mom does it like this," and I'd try to match it, feeling out of my depth. I wasn't a mom, I was 21, juggling classes and bills, but Clara didn't care about my age. To her, I was more than a babysitter, and that terrified me. What if I let her down? What if Mr. Harrington fired me? I started noticing how empty the house felt without Clara's chatter. I'd find myself looking forward to her stories, her hugs, her little quirks. One day, she made me a bracelet out of beads and insisted I never take it off. I wore it like a badge, a reminder of her trust. But the more she leaned on me, the more I worried about crossing a line. I was getting too attached, and I didn't know how to stop. This wasn't the plan. Mr. Harrington started joining us for dinner occasionally, and it was awkward at first, like we were all playing roles. He'd ask Clara about her day, but his questions felt rehearsed, like he was trying to be a dad from a script. Clara would light up, though, desperate for his attention, and I'd feel caught in the middle. I'd watch him struggle to connect, and I started to see the cracks in his perfect CEO facade. One night, he asked me about my life, my classes, my dreams, and I was caught off guard. Nobody had asked me that in a while. I mumbled something about wanting to be a teacher, and he nodded, like he was filing it away. Clara beamed, saying, "Lily's the best teacher," and I blushed. Those dinners started to feel less like a job and more like family. I didn't know what to make of it. Was I imagining things? Clara's 7th birthday was coming up, and she begged me to help plan it, not her dad. I threw myself into it, balloons, a cake, a princess theme, because I wanted her to feel special. Mr. Harrington gave me his credit card and said, "Make it nice," but he didn't get involved. On the day of the party, Clara was a bundle of joy, running around in her tiara, hugging me every chance she got. All her friends came, and I played host, feeling more like a mom than a babysitter. During the cake cutting, Clara grabbed my hand and said, "You're my favorite person." My throat tightened. Mr. Harrington was there, watching from the sidelines, his expression unreadable. Later, he thanked me again, but this time, his voice was softer, like he meant it. I started wondering if he saw me the way Clara did. The thought scared me as much as it warmed me. The turning point came one night during dinner, just the three of us, a rare moment when Mr. Harrington wasn't working. Clara was telling a story about her school play, her hands waving dramatically, and I was laughing, caught up in her energy. Out of nowhere, she turned to me and said, "Mommy, can you come to my play?" The word hit like a lightning bolt. The room went silent. Mr. Harrington froze, his fork halfway to his mouth, and I felt my face burn. I stammered, trying to correct her, but Clara just kept talking, oblivious to the weight of her words. "You'll come, right, Mommy?" she asked again, her eyes so full of hope. I glanced at Mr. Harrington, expecting anger or disapproval, but he just looked sad. I managed a week, "Of course, sweetie," and changed the subject. But that word, "Mommy," hung in the air, changing everything. After dinner, I put Clara to bed, my mind spinning from what she'd called me. Mommy. It wasn't just a slip, it was how she saw me, and it broke my heart and built it up all at once. Mr. Harrington was waiting in the kitchen when I came downstairs, a glass of wine in his hand. He didn't look mad, just lost, like he was grappling with something big. "She loves you," he said quietly, and I didn't know how to respond. I mumbled something about caring for her too, but he shook his head. "No, Lily. She really loves you. Like a mom." His voice cracked, and I saw the weight he carried. Guilt, maybe, for not being enough. We talked for hours that night, about Clara, about his ex-wife, about why he was so distant. For the first time, I saw him as more than my boss. I saw a man trying to figure it all out. And I realized I was part of their world now, whether I meant to be or not. The days after Clara called me Mommy were a whirlwind of emotions I didn't know how to process. I kept replaying that moment, her little voice so sure, so trusting, and it made my chest ache. I started noticing how much I'd changed since taking this job, how I'd gone from a broke college kid to someone Clara depended on. Every morning, she'd run to me, arms wide, like I was her home. I'd hug her back, but a part of me was terrified. What if I wasn't enough? What if I hurt her by getting too close? Mr. Harrington, James, as he asked me to call him, started opening up more. He'd linger after dinner, asking about my day, my plans, like he was trying to know me. I wasn't just the babysitter anymore, and that shift felt dangerous. Clara's love was pulling me in, and James's attention was complicating things. I didn't know where I stood. All I knew was that this house didn't feel so cold anymore. Clara's school play was a big deal. She was a flower in the spring pageant, and she'd practiced her lines for weeks. I helped her memorize them, sewing petals onto her costume while she giggled about being the prettiest flower. James promised to be there, but when the day came, he got stuck in a meeting. Clara's face fell when I told her, but she grabbed my hand and said, "You're here, so it's okay." I sat in the front row, cheering louder than anyone, my heart swelling with pride. After the play, she ran to me, not the other parents, and hugged me so tight I could barely breathe. "You're the best, Mommy," she whispered, and I froze again. This time, I didn't correct her. I just held her, tears stinging my eyes. When we got home, James was waiting, apologetic, but Clara only wanted to tell me about her performance. I realized then how deep this bond had grown. James started making more time for Clara, like he was waking up to how much she needed him. He'd join us for movie nights, sitting on the couch with Clara between us, her head on my lap. It felt so natural, but also surreal, like I'd stumbled into a family I hadn't signed up for. He'd catch my eye sometimes, and I'd see something there. Gratitude, maybe, or something deeper. I tried to ignore it, telling myself I was reading too much into it. But Clara wasn't helping. She'd draw pictures of the three of us, labeling us Mommy, Daddy, and me. I'd laugh it off, but James would look at the drawings with this quiet intensity. One night, he said, "You're good for her, Lily. For us." My stomach flipped. Was he including himself in this? I wasn't ready to think about what that meant, but I couldn't deny how much I cared for them both. I started staying later, not because I had to, but because I wanted to. Clara would beg for one more story, and James would pour me a coffee, saying, "Just stay a bit." We'd talk about everything. His work, my classes, Clara's latest obsession with dinosaurs. He told me about his ex-wife, how she left when Clara was 6 months old, chasing a life that didn't include them. I could hear the hurt in his voice, but also the love he had for Clara, even if he struggled to show it. I shared my own fears, about failing, about not being enough for Clara. He listened, really listened, and it felt like we were building something together. Clara's mommy slip started happening more often, and I stopped correcting her. It felt wrong to take that away from her. But every time she said it, I'd glance at James, wondering what he thought. He never objected, and that scared me as much as it thrilled me. One night, Clara got sick. Nothing serious, just a fever, but she wanted me to stay with her all night. I sat by her bed, stroking her hair, singing softly until she fell asleep. James came in, looking helpless, like he didn't know how to comfort her. "You're amazing with her," he said, his voice low. I shrugged, embarrassed, but he kept going. "No, really, Lily. You're what she needs." His eyes locked on mine, and for a moment, I thought he might say more. My heart raced, but I pushed it down. This was about Clara, not whatever was sparking between us. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were crossing into something new. I went home that night, replaying his words, wondering if I was imagining the way he looked at me. Clara's fever broke by morning, but my own turmoil was just starting. I was in too deep, and I didn't know how to get out. Clara's attachment to me started to worry me, not because I didn't love her, but because I loved her too much. What happened when this job ended? Would she be okay? Would I? I tried talking to James about it, but he'd brush it off, saying, "You're part of her life now." Part of her life. Those words echoed in my head, both a comfort and a warning. I started noticing how he'd watch me with Clara, like he was seeing me in a new light. One day, he asked me to stay for dinner, not as the babysitter, but as a guest. Clara was thrilled, setting a place for me like it was a special occasion. We laughed, we talked, and for a moment, it felt like we were a real family. But I wasn't her mom, and he wasn't, what? My boss? My friend? Something more. The lines were so blurred now, I couldn't see straight. All I knew was that I didn't want to leave. Clara's school had a family day, and she begged me to come, not James. I hesitated. Surely her dad should be there, but James insisted, saying he had a work call. So I went, holding Clara's hand as she showed off her art projects to the other parents. They assumed I was her mom, and I didn't correct them. It felt too good, too right, even if it was a lie. Clara beamed, calling me Mommy in front of everyone, and I let it happen. When I told James about it later, he didn't flinch. "She's happy," he said simply, but his eyes said more. He started asking me to stay over on weekends, saying Clara needed consistency. I agreed, but I knew it wasn't just for Clara. The mansion was starting to feel like home, and that terrified me. I was falling for both of them, and I didn't know how to stop. Was this still just a job? One night, after Clara was asleep, James and I sat in the living room, a fire crackling in the background. He opened up about his fears, how he felt like he was failing Clara, how he didn't know how to be the dad she deserved. I told him he was trying, and that mattered, but he shook his head. "You make it look so easy," he said, and I laughed, admitting how hard it was to keep up. We talked until midnight, about life, loss, and what we wanted for Clara. He reached for my hand, and I let him hold it, my heart pounding. "You're not just a babysitter, Lily," he said softly. I wanted to ask what I was, but I was too scared of the answer. The air between us felt charged, like one wrong move could change everything. I pulled my hand back, mumbling about needing to go. But as I left, I knew I was running from more than just that moment. Clara started asking questions about her real mom, and it broke my heart to see her confusion. "Why doesn't she love me?" she'd ask, and I'd fumble for answers, saying her mom just had to go away. I'd distract her with games or stories, but the questions kept coming. One day, she drew a picture of her mom, a faceless woman, and then tore it up, saying, "You're better." I hugged her, tears in my eyes, but I felt like a fraud. I wasn't her mom, no matter how much she wanted me to be. When I told James about it, he looked gutted. "I should have been there for that," he said, and I saw the guilt eating at him. We started working together more, trying to help Clara feel secure. It felt like we were parenting, even if we didn't say it out loud. The more we did, the more I wondered what we were becoming. This wasn't what I signed up for, but I couldn't walk away. By now, I was spending most of my time at the mansion, my own apartment feeling like a relic of another life. Clara would cry when I left, and James would look at me like he wanted to ask me to stay forever. One evening, he suggested I move in, not as a babysitter, but as something else. He didn't finish the sentence, but the implication hung there. I laughed it off, saying I couldn't afford to quit my studies, but my heart was racing. Clara overheard and started jumping, yelling, "Live with us, Mommy!" I froze, looking at James, expecting him to correct her. He didn't. Instead, he smiled, like he was testing the idea. I said I'd think about it, but I was already imagining it, waking up here, being with them every day. The thought was as thrilling as it was terrifying. I wasn't just a babysitter anymore, but what was I? And what did James want me to be? The next few weeks were a blur of routine, school drop-offs, dinners, bedtime stories, but nothing felt routine anymore. Clara's mommy slips were constant now, and I'd stopped flinching at the word. It felt natural, even if it wasn't true. James was around more, taking Clara to the park, asking me to join them. We'd walk together, Clara between us, and strangers would smile like we were a family. I started to let myself imagine it. What if I stayed? What if this was my life? But doubts crept in. I was young, broke, with dreams of my own. Could I really take on this role? James seemed to sense my hesitation, always checking if I was okay. One day, he said, "You don't have to decide anything now, Lily." But his eyes said he wanted me to. I was torn between my heart and my head, and Clara was at the center of it all. Clara's teacher called me in for a meeting, saying Clara had been talking about her new mom at school. I explained I was just the babysitter, but the teacher smiled, saying, "She doesn't see it that way." I left feeling like I was carrying a secret I didn't fully understand. When I told James, he didn't seem surprised. "She's been calling you that for a while," he said, like it was the most normal thing. I asked him if it bothered him, and he shook his head. "It feels right," he said, and my breath caught. Right? How could it be right? I was nobody, just a college kid who answered an ad. But the way he looked at me like I was more, made me question everything. I started wondering if I could be what Clara needed. If I could be what they both needed. The idea was overwhelming, but I couldn't shake it. One night, Clara had another nightmare, and I stayed with her until she fell asleep, her hand clutching mine. James found us like that, and instead of leaving, he sat on the floor beside me. We didn't talk for a while, just listened to Clara's soft breathing. Then he said, "I don't know what we'd do without you." It wasn't just gratitude, it was raw, like he was admitting something he'd held back. I told him I didn't know what I'd do without them either, and it was the truth. We sat there, in the dark, closer than we'd ever been. I could feel the weight of what wasn't said, the possibility of something more. When I finally left her room, he walked me to the door, his hand brushing mine. I didn't pull away this time. I didn't want to. Everything was changing, and I was letting it. Clara's birthday came around again, and this time, James was all in, helping me plan every detail. We threw a huge party, and seeing him laugh with Clara, covered in cake frosting, made my heart ache in the best way. During the party, Clara grabbed both our hands, pulling us into a group hug, and said, "This is my family." The guests laughed, but I saw James's eyes soften. Later, he pulled me aside and said, "She's right, you know." My heart stopped. Was he saying what I thought he was? I tried to play it cool, but inside, I was a mess. We cleaned up together after the party, moving around each other like we'd done it forever. Clara fell asleep on the couch, and I carried her to bed, James watching me like I was the answer to something. I didn't know what to say, so I just smiled. But I felt it too. This was more than a job now. Now, as I sit here, watching Clara draw another picture of Team Awesome, I realize how far we've come. I started as a babysitter, thinking this was just a job to pay my bills. But Clara's mommy changed everything, pulling me into a life I never expected. James and I are still figuring out what we are, but we're doing it together, for Clara and for us. The mansion doesn't feel cold anymore. It's full of laughter, love, and the chaos of our little family. I'm still scared sometimes, worried I'm not enough, but then Clara smiles at me, and James takes my hand, and I know I'm home. This isn't what I planned, but it's better than anything I could have dreamed. I'm not just a babysitter anymore. I'm theirs, and they're mine, and I wouldn't trade it for the world. If you loved this story, hit that subscribe button for more emotional journeys that will keep you coming back for more.